time, I'll get started. And first of all, thank you for joining. I know we've had many conversations in the past. We met at AMAR back in September, and Bob, you and I, we've been talking over Zoom, over Teams the last couple of weeks. And I've been visiting a lot of different association events and trade shows and conferences, and what I find is that there's always a major focus on the manufacturers or the wholesalers, but never really like a focus for manufacturers reps. So my objective is to create an environment where I can offer value to manufacturers reps specifically, share insightful information and knowledge that'll help your business develop leaders within your organizations, skill up your team members, and give you some new tools and the mindset that you can leverage to excel, as both of you are in businesses that are in growth mode, that are expanding. So I've shared my background before. Bob, you're pretty in tune with it. And Danielle, I'm not sure if I shared with you fully what my background is and why this. So I work directly one-on-one with manufacturers reps agencies, and that comes from my experience in sales. I started my sales career working for Purolator in Canada, which is UPS. Worked up the ranks, and then I went to Grainger from there. So I've got a real good understanding of logistics, transportation, and then wholesale distribution. From there, I went to the plumbing manufacturing world and worked for a company called IPEX, Camplas specifically. And I developed the technical sales division within that organization, deployed it across North America, and that's when I started working with manufacturers reps everywhere across this beautiful land. I have lots of experience on the ground, job sites, working with wholesalers, getting products specified, training people in different associations like ASPE and ASHRI and all of these things, delivering CEU credits, but most importantly, developing teams to do that stuff. From Camplas, I went to ITW, which is a manufacturer of construction fasteners, very highly specifiable products, and I managed the sales team in Canada, the commercial sales team. Reported directly to the president, and was tasked with aggressively growing the business through developing team members, doing more with less resources, and growing the profitability and the operating income of that particular division. That's where a lot of my skills around leadership development came in. Not only was I developing teams to move up the ranks, but I was also going through a lot of leadership development training of my own. So there was a program they put me through which was corporate driven. I was also sent to Yale and to Kellogg Northwestern and studied different strategies and approaches to leadership. And when I left ITW, I left amicably in a place where I had empowered the team so much that I could step away and they would continue to rise. It was a really nice departure. So that's my background, and now my focus is working directly with agency owners, really getting clear on the vision, the direction of the business, putting strategies in place to empower team members and build future leaders. I mean, you're part of the succession plan. You're part of the succession plan, and help them work on the business rather than in it. Move away from that multifaceted, reactive lifestyle in business to a more strategic, proactive approach to the business, allowing you to free up time so that you're doing the most critical things that require your skill set, and you're learning to develop leaders so that the vision comes to fruition. I read a book by John Maxwell called The 5 Levels of Leadership. I'm not sure if you ever heard that book. Incredible book. And what it really talks about is how you've got 5 levels to your leadership journey. Right? You've got that first manager role, right? You take an individual contributor, high-performing salesperson, and you make them the sales manager. Well, that person is generally a really good salesperson, maybe not an amazing manager, right? So it talks about how you earn the right to become a manager after you've gotten the role, and that's when you go from level 1 to level 2, and that's because you start developing the skill sets around managing people, and you build trust, and you do things for them, you guide them, you mentor them. Then it goes to level 3, which you're having a real impact on the business. And then level 4 is when you start you're a leader and you start developing leaders. But the pinnacle, and what my goal is as the premier partner for manufacturers reps agencies, is getting owners to a point where they reach level 5. And level 5 is your entire purpose within the organization is driven around developing leaders who develop leaders. Nothing else. That's your focus. So that you know that your business is running so smoothly and you've empowered everyone and they're leveraging their strengths and their skill sets and they're continuously learning and guiding and coaching, that the business can run itself. That's my goal. That's my purpose. And part of this whole journey of leadership is nurturing the growth of your employees, your new hires, and your newly promoted employees. Because, again, like level 1, oftentimes we take an individual contributor, they're an amazing sales engineer, and then you put them in a management role, and they continue being an amazing sales engineer. So how do you shift that mindset? How do you onboard them and develop them so that it's done effectively? There's a myriad of challenges out there when it comes to structured onboarding, and there's a real need for it. There's quite a few different stats that I pulled from different resources, but only 12% of employees surveyed by Xavi, 12% would agree that the company they work for has a good onboarding process. It's a pretty low number. All right. 60% of companies, when they hire someone or bring somebody on, don't set any goals or objectives for new hires. They hire them, tell them what their roles are, but they don't set any learning objectives or goals. 81% of new hires say that they feel overwhelmed during the onboarding process. And that would make sense if you're not onboarding them well and you're just dumping information on them all the time. They're an information overload, right? There's no structure. There's no goals. There's no objectives. So of course they're going to feel overwhelmed. And there's a real disconnect between the hiring and the onboarding. Most people get really excited when they're going through the hiring process and they get the job, right? They're starting a new career, they're entering into a managerial role, but then it's ice cold when they get there because they're not guided. They're not given the tools to onboard effectively. And these challenges lead to many things. They lead to expectations not being met. You get hired, you're not onboarded properly, What's one of the things that you've heard before that people joke about it? Oh, you didn't train me properly. Lack of training. You ever heard something like that? All right. That's because maybe they're right. Maybe there's a lack of consistency around the way that you're bringing on and onboarding people within the organization. And that leads to reduced productivity because they're not necessarily clear or sure on what it is they should be doing. They're not spending their time in the most productive places, which is a result of insufficient resource allocation. You bring somebody on or you promote somebody, you want to make sure that they know exactly what they should be doing that's going to have the biggest impact on the business. But if they're left to their own demise or their own will to figure it out on their own, they're going to be spending time in places where maybe it doesn't make the most sense. And that's the big picture is that at the end of the day, without a clear onboarding process, there's no clear communication. So it leads to poor communication. The negative impact is real without structure. You've got higher turnover rates, right? And that could be people quitting. That could be people getting fired because they're not meeting expectations. You've got a lot of time spent in order to get things done. So there's an extended time to productivity. Performance isn't fully optimized. When there's no structured onboarding process and people are promoted into new roles and their experience is negative, that can impact the company culture. People talk about these things. Things are said, which leads to communication breakdowns. And once again, resource inefficiencies. If you don't have a proper onboarding plan and then a month from now your new manager has a really important project to do and he should have known how to do this stuff as part of the goals and the objectives of a structured plan, but he doesn't know how, and all of a sudden you're getting pulled away from your role to backfill positions, backfill tasks. The resources are inefficiently being spread. So we could discuss many more things that could go wrong, but that's it in a nutshell. All the reasons why an effective onboarding plan is ultra important. If you standardize onboarding and you create a process, and many organizations have a process, and they're great maybe at using that process for new hires. 9 times out of 10, they don't have one for a promoted employee. And 9 times out of 10, they'll start using the process, but it never gets carried out fully. So this is where standardizing it and ensuring that you have a consistent approach at using it to increase its effectiveness is key. And when you do this, you get better team performance. You get reduced turnover, right? If you're growing your business and you're saying you're going above 50 people now, when you lose 2 people, what kind of impact does that have on the business, right? What kind of resources are you now spending hiring those people, finding new people, hiring them, training them, all that kind of stuff? And when you get better team performance and reduced turnover, your revenue stream can increase alongside of it, especially when it's salespeople. You also get better communication across the board because expectations are pretty clear. So I'm going to ask you to reflect. What does your current onboarding process look like within your organization? And how has your onboarding process affected the performance with new hires and newly promoted employees? Anyone want to share what comes up for them?
Well, I agree the onboarding process is so critical. I always say, it's hard to find people, but the real work begins once they come through the door.
Right.
So, with the latest what worked for one-on-one is only working in group setting. So we've got a dedicated internal trainer that kind of is working with the group and bringing them along for the first 2 or 3 weeks. And then they're getting kind of turned over to their team, the team they're going to be working with. So at least they're all getting the same basic training, which is a lot of procedure-based stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, how do you do, what are the HR policies, if there's company cars, what are the systems that you should be using, passwords, health benefits, all of that kind of stuff, right? Yeah. What are the training platforms and the modules you should be taking? Yeah.
But yeah, the real intense training is more that one-on-one time when it comes to their actual job and tasks, what they're responsible for.
Mm.
I think that typically gets like, oh, you're really good at this now, you're moving into a new role, and there's could be more direction into the management side of those promoted roles.
How long is your onboarding process typically last, if you were to look at a time frame?
Until it's like, I'd say it's probably 6 months. Which of course, maybe
Mm-hmm.
there's still a lot of time and attention done with just inside the office. It's 2 years in a sense for some people because of requirements.
Is that clearly defined?
For each role, yeah.
Yeah, so when they're on board, you've got an onboarding process for 2 years?
Okay, so for inside team, we tell everyone, like, you and I will be working together.
Okay.
And it's probably 3 months in case any changes that come up, and then we'll see what happens after from there.
Right. So the learning curve is different per individual. Yeah. When I look at your current onboarding process, what sort of materials do your new hires receive from you? Outside of all the internal process stuff, but like in terms of an onboarding plan, what does that look like?
Depending upon the role, we'll have an agenda, that's like, say 6 months, 9 months, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
We have procedure documents that essentially follow what they're doing in person and how things are supposed to work, how you're supposed to do things. I think the biggest hurdle for us is the technical trainings, which you can't do all at once because, like I said, information overload. It's a gradual progression over time.
Yep.
And how quickly they grasp that is upon them, essentially, because you can't just do training. They got to get weeded into the actual sales process as well, so they can actually start contributing quick.
Yeah.
That's how we do it, at least. We'll get them the basics of what products are, 80-20.
So you prioritize, you've got a plan that says, hey, over the next 6 months, this is what it looks like. Here are the priority trainings. The other trainings you've got to figure out on your own. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, for like inside the office, if I show someone this is how you find the pricing or do this job quote,
Mm-hmm.
now you're going to do it yourself, now you're going to do the training on your own, and now we're going to send you the video of your training, and
Okay.
we'll take, that's your reference, and so it's kind of like watch, learn, do.
So from a process standpoint, going to reflection number 2, how would you, another way to ask this question is, how would you rate the approach from a performance standpoint? If you were to give it a scale, you don't have to answer me, okay? But for yourself as a reflection, are you getting the performance that you were hoping to get out of your new hires and your promoted employees with your existing approach? All right. So, something to think about. Beautiful. Thank you for sharing. All right. So, when onboarding, there's a lot of different frameworks and tips and tricks that I've experienced working with different really Fortune 200 companies. But the ones that really stick out to me, the ones where I've seen the most success, and the ones where when I'm working with manufacturers rep partners have the biggest impact are these 5. And that is to, step 1, always develop based on the individual. You should have like a template of what an onboarding plan looks like, but depending on the individual, develop a comprehensive onboarding plan. And I like how you said, 6 months, you said 2 years, right? But if you took the time to clearly define the learning objectives that you want this person to grasp in their new role, okay? So an example would be, in month 1, the learning objective would be that I want to make sure that this contributor knows who all the internal resources are, that they have access to all the information, that they've demonstrated that they're able to sign in and access that information and utilize it to their full potential. In month 2, I want them to be able to demonstrate that they can pull reports and show me sales history and understand what the data is telling them so that they know how to prioritize their day-to-day. In month 3, I want them to have completed 7 trainings, technical trainings. In month 4, they should be out with their customers and have identified opportunities and inputted that into the CRM, so on and so forth. So that when you clearly identify those learning objectives, then you can build your onboarding plan and your training schedule within that. So it sounds like you're doing that, which is beautiful. But those are always the top 3. The one that often makes a big difference, and you talked about I'll be working closely with you one-on-one, is always assigning an onboarding mentor or 2. And I don't mean you, Bob, and I don't mean you, Danielle. I mean somebody within your organization who you want to skill up anyways, and maybe as a future leader in the company, will work closely with that person and ensure that they're following the onboarding plan, that they're being productive, that they're pointed in the right direction, that the training is sinking in and it's making sense. And then from there, have an ongoing feedback loop. So if you're onboarding them for, you've got a 30, 60, 90-day plan. Well, you, as the leader or the hiring manager, you want to make sure that you have a consistent, ongoing one-on-one meeting with this person so that you are assessing their progress, making sure that they're meeting those learning objectives, and that you're giving each other feedback so that they're moving along. You don't just leave them in the dark. Okay? And if I could break it down to 3, I like to work in the rules of 3. The most important ones are the top 3. Have an onboarding plan ready. Make sure that it's aligned with clearly set learning objectives, and that you have consistent training. And that training can go out as far as it needs to. Scheduled in, ready to rock and roll. Because when you develop a comprehensive onboarding plan, you could look at it. I always start with the 90-day approach, right? What do you want them to achieve in the first 30 days, 60, and 90 days? Get specific with the timeline. Be thorough. Be thorough. Be so thorough that you've already pre-booked all their meetings for them. Be so thorough that they feel so supported when they receive this 30, 60, 90-day plan that excitement that they had when they first got hired persists, which leads to motivation and productivity. You know, when I first got promoted into national accounts at Purolator, my mentor at the time, as I was moving up the ranks, I was being interviewed for the role, and he said to me, my mentor said, look, if you really want this job, you, as the contributor, should write your onboarding plan. So I went ahead and wrote a thorough 30, 60, 90-day onboarding plan. Okay. And sorry, Orgo, my eyes are flashing a little bit here. You can tone down the pictures a little bit if you don't mind, just because. But he recommended that I write an onboarding plan. Okay. And the funny thing is I got the job. I got promoted. And then on my first day, I went to the director of sales and I said, okay, now what? And he looks at me and he goes, well, what are you talking about? And I said, well, what do I do? He says, Chris, you wrote a thorough 30, 60, 90-day onboarding plan. He goes, follow the plan. Follow the plan and we'll get together every 2 days and we'll measure your progress along the way for the first 90 days. I was kind of like a little floored. Like, to me, when I put it together, it was a project to get hired, not realizing that the impact that it would have would actually be the plan for my new job. So point being is that I was thorough and that I had tailored it to the specific needs of the role. And to this day, that company still uses that onboarding plan for all new employees in national accounts. And I'm just the guy that wrote it. But what they liked about it was it had timelines, trainings, specific, everything. When you're setting your clear learning objectives, again, define them really, really clearly. Focus on skill development, okay? If you're hiring somebody in a technical role, what are those skills that they need to have after 30 days? Lay it out, document it, set it as a clear expectation, as a goal, and include it as part of the plan. So that when you do your feedback sessions, you're able to measure and assess how are they trending towards the expectations of what we need in the first 30 days. And if it's going great, perfect, can we fast track them? Or do we need to offer extra support? But this way it's measurable and they continue learning. Training is such a big thing. Everyone I talk to in this industry talks about training, right? There's expectations that salespeople are going to be product experts. There's expectations around being able to offer CEU credits to engineers. There's all kinds of things. Internal systems, CRM, you name it. So by standardizing your training content and building it into the plan to a point where you're so specific on the timelines and it's pre-scheduled in for that person over that 30, 60, 90 makes a huge difference, because the delivery is going to happen, the knowledge is going to sink in, and when you're having your one-on-ones, you know when they were supposed to have it, so then you can ask them questions, or like knowledge-based questions, like, so tell me, what does this product do? What problem does it solve in the marketplace for the end user? How does this help an engineer? Which products make the highest margin for us? Or commission dollars, whatever it might be. And as you get to know them, you can understand how that training is impacting them. But most importantly, you're giving them the training that's crucial for their success, and it's clearly defined in a plan. Mentorship is so huge. It's so huge. And we often promote people or hire people in roles, and in this business, we give them an onboarding plan, but more times than not, they end up kind of just trial by fire, right? You need to be guided. You want to guide them, and you want to promote your business culture. Give them the resources. Give them somebody who has the experience. Give them somebody that has the expertise. Give them somebody who's a future leader in your business. Not just yourself. That can partner with them. That you can then meet with that person and get feedback from them. And not only skill up the new hire, but skill up the coaching skills of your mentor at the same time. In your world, what does successful mentorship look like? Who would make a great mentor in your business? We like to do things on our own a lot. But the most critical piece of all of this, no matter how elaborate the plan you put into place, how thorough it is, how clear the objectives are, how much training you give them, none of that matters unless you're checking in on them in a prepared manner, consistently, on an ongoing basis. And I mean, like, for the first couple of weeks daily, and then for the next couple of weeks every couple of days, and then for the next couple of weeks at a bare minimum once a week, where you're making sure they're aligned, they're learning, that there's transparency around any gaps in learning or requirements or resources or needs that they might have, that you keep that communication open. Because as leaders, what happens is we get pulled in multiple directions, we start getting comfortable that they're doing the right things, so we kind of just let them go and let them do what they need to do without checking in on them frequently, until, of course, something happens and then you got to. And you make time for them. But you're able to measure their progress. And that's where your onboarding plan, if you've got learning objectives and critical timelines and specifics, that allows you to measure it. So you can use it as a checklist, right? And in your one-on-ones, when you review and measure the progress, you should be using a 2x2 framework. And what I mean by a 2x2 framework is it's feedback session. And there's 2 questions that you should be asking your newly promoted employee or your new hire on a regular basis, every time you're in an interaction with them. If they just did a training, if they just delivered a presentation, if they just had their first sale, if they just had their first issue, all of these situations, ask them 2 questions. First one is, what do you think you did very well in that situation? They'll tell you. If you were there and you witnessed it and you observed, then you can say, you know what, I agree, you did that very well, but I also think you did this well, so that they get an opportunity to observe what they're doing well. The second question is, what would you do better next time? And by asking that question, they're reflecting so they can learn continuously as they progress from every interaction, every opportunity, every training, every situation, and they could tell you what they believe they could do better next time so they don't duplicate the same mistakes or they improve every time. And at the same time, if you were there and you witnessed the situation, you can chime in and say, I agree, great idea to do better, but here's what I think you can do better as well. Because when you do 2x2 framework like this, where you ask them a do good and a do better, you open the door to offer feedback with little resistance because they've already let their guard down. So there's no ego, nothing most of the time. It's a great way for continuous learning. So you want to structure one-on-ones and have continuous feedback on a regular basis. So you can measure, communicate, and adjust as needed. So another reflection for you. You know, you've got a lot of these trainings that you're doing, right? You're talking about technical trainings. How do you measure the retention of like key information and skills that your new hires and your newly promoted employees should be having? How do you measure that today?
That's the question.
So you're measuring it by seeking feedback. That's what it is. Okay. Perfect. Yeah. What about you? How are you measuring, making sure that they're retaining information?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
And they're
Okay. Yeah. Both effective. What if they did a self-evaluation based on their experience with the onboarding plan, and you said, okay, learning objective number 1 was this. Evaluate how you feel you are and how you can demonstrate your ability to that you've learned that skill, that learning objective, you've met that objective. So an extra step you can take as part of your onboarding plan and the learning objectives is an evaluation. Right? We do performance evaluations on a regular basis, hopefully, at least annually with our employees. Well, when you're onboarding someone, you should evaluate them based on their onboarding. Make sense? All right. So you've got these challenges that we talked about. The 5 challenges. When somebody's onboarding, the biggest challenge oftentimes, if there's no structured approach, is that there's unclear expectations. Well, you can fix that by ensuring that you set clear learning objectives. And when you set clear learning objectives, then you can provide consistent training to meet those learning objectives, which overcomes the biggest challenge in the market, which happens to be inconsistent training. When onboarding isn't done effectively, you see reduced productivity. Well, you can make sure that you overcome that by developing, again, a comprehensive onboarding plan, which sounds like you have. How can you enhance it? Oftentimes, resources are stretched, but if you assign an onboarding mentor, a future leader in your business, you're empowering them, you're delegating some of the responsibilities, so you're freeing up time for yourself, and you're skilling up the employee and that mentor at the same time. which is a good use of resources, quite frankly. And you overcome poor communication. Oh, I wasn't trained properly. Oh, I didn't know how to do this. Oh, I never learned that. Boom. By ensuring that you have ongoing 2x2 framework of assessing their progress and offering feedback all the time. What are the 2 questions you ask for the 2x2 framework?
What do you think you're really good at?
Excellent. Yeah. One do good, one do better. Yeah. Have you ever asked those questions before?
Yeah, we do biannual performance reviews.
Yeah. So you've been asking those every 6 months? Okay.
Yeah, we ask all employees.
Beautiful. Yeah. Imagine if you asked that every day. Yeah. Right? But it was a cultural thing,
Yeah.
not just you. Right? Everyone is helping each other out. Excellent. So if there's anything that I hope that you would leave with today is that you've identified one thing. One thing that you can actionably do to enhance your existing onboarding process. Simple as that. There's lots of different ideas. Onboarding is a deep HR discussion. I've gone and simplified it to the best of my abilities to assist manufacturers, reps, agencies when they're bringing on and growing their team and promoting individuals. But after our workshop today, my ask is, hey, take away one thing. So I want to know, what's one actionable step that you can take with you to enhance your onboarding process when you leave here today?
I mean, just that the mentor.
Mm-hmm.
But more into assigning that person as their mentor and making both parties
Yeah.
aware, work together, and coaching up those people.
Right. There's ways to make sure that the mentor's on board. Right. Maybe that's part of their goals for the year. Right? Because they're going to mentor 2 people this year. And you're going to evaluate things like this. Make it part of their growth journey. Yeah. Do you have one actionable step that you're going to take with you, Bob?
I guess I have to dig in a little bit more. I mean, I know they have action plans, but I don't know if they're following up with the new folks as regularly as they ought to be to making sure they're comprehending and understanding.
Right.
Like they're probably just passing it off to the next person in line.
Yeah.
Probably can be better there to make sure that they are growing and they are retaining the information in a meaningful way.
Yeah. Yeah, making sure there's regular, consistent feedback. Yeah, awesome. Good. Yeah, I know you've got you've got a team of people that manage the group, but good stuff to pass down. So, in terms of resources and support from me, I've got a simple approach. I work one-on-one as an option for manufacturers, reps, agencies. If you're looking at enhancing your onboarding plan, I could help you with that in a one-on-one individual setting where we would look at it together and make sure that it's optimized and that I hold you or your manager, whoever it is, your leader, accountable to following all the steps within that onboarding plan for their new employee or their new hire. So as simple as that. I also offer developing leaders programs that incorporate this stuff, but I have done work with agencies specific to onboarding stuff, where it's a one-on-one setting, and I help them there. So that concludes the workshop. I appreciate both of you coming today. I hope you found it helpful.
Thank you very much.
And I invite you to reach out anytime if you want a soundboard or looking for a new perspective. I'm here for you. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome.